Who wrote the Gospels? And were they actually eyewitnesses? Well, there are four authors of the Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Matthew and John were actually disciples and eyewitnesses of Jesus. But Mark and Luke were not. They were part of the early church movement, and they were contemporaries of Peter and Paul. So Mark got a lot of his information from Peter, who was obviously an eyewitness, and Luke got his information from a multitude of witnesses. He was a doctor and put together an orderly account, it says. He painstakingly interviewed many people, including Peter and others, about what was happening and what Jesus actually said and did. So even though two of the authors were not actually eyewitnesses, they were around other eyewitnesses and lived at the same time as those eyewitnesses. But why do they differ, you might say? Why do they contradict each other? Well, think of a car accident. If you had four people at an intersection that were pedestrians, would they say the exact same thing about that accident? No, they'd have a different angle, a different perspective. They might say things a little bit differently depending on their personality and the nuances of what they saw. And that's kind of how it is with the Gospels. We see that Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, they emphasize different things based on their predispositions and their agendas. We see Matthew, for example, emphasizing the Jewish history and how Jesus was the prophesied Messiah that came to fulfill the Old Testament promises. We see how John is emphasizing the deity of Christ, about how Jesus is divine and fully God and fully human. Each of these people have their own personalities and agendas, and that is not lost on the reader. So keep that in mind when you think, why do these contradict each other? Or why does one gospel say this about this event and another gospel doesn't include that detail? Because it's a different angle, it's a different perspective. It doesn't mean it's less authentic. It actually indicates it's more authentic because they're not going to be guilty of collusion. They're not going to be guilty of, oh, let's all say the same thing to make sure it all matches up. No, they came and they wrote with what actually happened from their perspective and the people they interviewed. And none of the contradictions negate anything of substantial theology or substantial doctrine. So look at the Gospels and say, these are different perspectives from different people based on their own predispositions, personalities, and agendas. And that's okay, because that's how real life works. That's how history works. History is messy, real life is messy, the Gospels are messy. They actually say embarrassing things about people that they're close to, another reason why they are true and can be trusted.